Inside the stadium, they may look small, but their hearts beat strong. Hands clench. The stands roar with excitement. The game kicks off. Dreams take flight. Because every strike tells a story. Because every goal echoes across the continent. In Africa, football is more than just a game. Follow the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations from December 21st to January 18th on France 24.
France Media Monde, all around the world.
Feliz Año Nuevo.
Happy New Year.
Chúc mừng năm mới.
Heri ya mwaka mpya.
Happy New Year.
Bonne année.
Feliz Año Nuevo.
Happy New Year.
France Media Monde wishes you a Happy New Year 2026.
This week, Valérie Fayolle meets comedian and director Kéron. With Dragon, his new stage show, he's taking improv to a new level.
Je sais comment ça commence, je sais comment ça finit, mais au milieu, je me laisse une liberté totale. Il se passe toujours des trucs fous et je vais chercher le côté unique de chaque soirée.
Next, let yourselves be transported by a joyful group of musicians from West Africa. For 50 years now, the orchestra Baobab has captivated listeners with its genre-defying music. To finish, we visit a ceramics gallery in the heart of the Marais district, where Alban Hergot shows us her creations in this intimate space. Watch Paris des Arts on France 24.
Hello and welcome back to our daily Africa Cup of Nations coverage here on France 24. I'm joined once again in the studio by Tando Sabia. Good evening, Tando. Good to have you back, and good to have you back also Andreas Evagora. Both of you will be going through the latest in the tournament, which has begun, of course, with the quarterfinals today. For now, though, let's just take a first quick look at the results that have come through. The first results being Senegal's win against Mali. Not the most beautiful win. We'll get into that in just a second. And Morocco's 2-0 win against Cameroon. Well, that will definitely have taken a bit of weight off their shoulders. Let's head straight to Rabat, where the home nation then has just booked a spot for the semi-finals. 2 goals either side of half-time were enough to beat a downtrodden Cameroon side. Selina Sykes has just stepped out of the stadium for us. Selina, that's a major step forward for Morocco, isn't it? Who some had begun to write off just over the last few days, hadn't they?
That's right. The fans have been pretty hard on their team, at least some of them, shall we say. Obviously, a lot of questions after that narrow 1-0 win against Tanzania. Walid Regragui, the coach, actually citing the France 98 team who won the World Cup. Regragui, who grew up in France, saying that they had to suffer en route to the final. They had many near misses, getting knocked out, winning on penalties at one point. But everybody forgets that they obviously beat Brazil in the final 3-0. And maybe we're starting to see glimmers of that France 98 team in the Moroccan side, because tonight was really an example of complete control, complete dominance by the Atlas Lions, beating Cameroon 2-0, thanks to first that goal from Brahim Diaz in the 26th minute from that corner. Ayoub El-Kabi getting the header, and Diaz getting his body on the end of it to push it into the back of the net to send the stadium completely wild in the first half. Morocco completely in control, really. It was going to be a game of fine margins. They had 3 shots on target, 2 that went in. The second one in the 75th minute, thanks to Ismael Saibari. It was a long ball that he got to his legs. He was at the second post with completely alone, and he took a nice control and sent that one back into the back of the net. So there we go. After a lot of questions, a lot of criticism from fans, and Morocco seem to have finally got their Afcon going here, obviously against their biggest opposition yet, though it has to be said, James, Cameroon not posing a real threat.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just want to ask you, because I'm quite far away, but we can actually hear some chants there from the crowds just behind you. What was it like in the stadium during that game? Because that must have been a breath of fresh air for them, and I can imagine they celebrated quite a lot.
James, the atmosphere in the stadium every time that Morocco plays is quite remarkable. It is a wall of sound, of whistles, cheering every time that the opposition has the ball. It must be quite intimidating, it has to be said, for opposition teams to be playing here. And as you can hear, I can hear that fans are still in the stadium behind me, singing and chanting. Obviously, they're quite impressed by this one, James, and so they should be. I mean, Diaz getting 5 goals now at this Afcon. They have a lot to be happy about here this evening.
Yeah, indeed. It was the question of the Atlas Lions there, getting over the Indomitable Lions. Cameroon not really living up to their name tonight. In that case, they didn't have much to offer, not a single shot on target. That's right.
That's right, James. As much as we can praise the Atlas Lions, it has to be said that the Indomitable Lions didn't put up much of a threat. As you said, 0 shots on target. We were at their training session yesterday, and they spoke about this game being one that would be very tight, going to the finest margins, that they had to seize on their opportunities when they had them, but they didn't really make it any. You kept on waiting for them to get that first shot on target. They tried a bit towards the end to knock on the door after Morocco got that second goal, but really, I think there'll be a lot of regrets in the dressing room this evening, because they never really got started. They didn't really turn up here in the stadium in Rabat, James.
All right, so we'll let you know from there, because I know you've got a bit of travelling to do to get to tomorrow's game. Have a good night, and we'll speak to you tomorrow. Sina, we're going to continue the conversation over here in the studio. I'm going to go, of course, I'm going to go with you, Tanner, this time first. I mean, this was clearly a deserved win for Morocco, whether it was the first or the second half, completely dominating their game. Something new that we've seen from them compared to the other games.
They look complete. This looks like a whole squad. Seeing also the changes that they've made. It's looking more or less the same as the squad that played against Tanzania the last time, but this time seeing the change of Azal Zui going to the left side and seeing Hakimi stay on the right. And so you have on either side box-to-box players who don't make room in the wings for the opposition. You saw Mbemo was neutralized in this game. He was almost non-existent, no shots on target like you said earlier on. And so just seeing how they complete the side, also creating chances. We spoke earlier on seeing that El Kabi and Brahim Diaz were the only people who got their names on the score sheets, and this time around making some room for Saibari. So you can see that they're having a lot more fun, there's a lot more composure, and the game is not necessarily built around the same players anymore. It's a lot more open, it's still tactical, but it's a much more colourful Moroccan side, and we can also see which are the players who make the difference and why now Morocco stands a chance to win this edition of the African Cup of Nations. It's El Kabi and Brahim Diaz who just make it magical.
Such different talk to the ways that we've been commentating about Morocco until now. I mean, there was so much, pressure from them. Cameroon could barely get out of their own half.
Yeah, they started well, and it was the Morocco that we know. You know, it was very intense. It didn't give the opponents much space at all. If I played devil's advocate slightly, Brahim Diaz is having a brilliant tournament. Remember, at the beginning of the tournament, he was my tip to be the top scorer, so I'm happy about that. I think there's a danger that they're over-dependent on Diaz up front. In the midfield, Neil El Ainoui is a fantastic player. You know, he had the fewest touches of any player on the pitch, and he's playing in the middle of the centre midfield. That tells you something. They work really hard off the ball. They stop their opponents playing. In Aguerd, I think they've got maybe the most underrated centre-back on the African continent. But I think they need to get Hakimi much more into the game. If you look to see how Hakimi plays for PSG, he's everywhere. He's a right wing, centre forward. And I think the best way of them winning this tournament is for him to play in a more mobile situation, because playing a really defensive setup, that can get you a long way. Look, they got them to the semi-finals in the World Cup, very defensive against good teams, Portugal, Spain. It's done the same here. But to go all the way, I think to win the tournament, they need a little bit more. And I think that extra special thing will be Hakimi if you can get in the opposition third.
And as you mentioned, there's a new goal scorer tonight in the name of Saibari, making a difference for the team again. So we've seen a bit of shuffle around in the teams. I'm just wondering, there was a moment when we were watching the game together, 69th minute, there was a foul by Messina on Belmo, Cameroon's Belmo. That wasn't given. Possible penalty. I don't know what you guys thought of that, whether that was something... I mean, there's been some talk about about referees sometimes being lenient, of course, to host nations. Was that the case tonight?
Look, Morocco, they got a bit lucky against Tanzania as well with that push that wasn't given.
Because it's not the first time, which is
it's
why
not the first
might
time.
be.
It's not the first time there's been home advantage in world football for a team. I think it was 50-50. Personally, I on the fact if it's not a very clear penalty, I wouldn't give it. So I don't think that was a particularly scandalous decision, although Morocco have been on the receiving end of some good decisions over the last few weeks.
Yeah, indeed. Let's have a word though for Cameroon. They got to the round of 16 last time. This time they leave in the quarterfinals. It's a step above for them, but I mean they're not going to be happy with that because Cameroon, of course, have pedigree as former winners, of course. But of course they come into this. David Pagou heading the team only just a few weeks before Afcon actually started. Is this reconstructed? I mean, is this a moment, do you think, Tando, where Cameroon is going to move forward from this point? They're going to keep building?
I think they can, because early in the game, you get a forced substitution in defense with Junior Chamadeo coming out of the game. And I think that's what changes the tactics that you come in initially with. And that changed the game for them.
Huge player in Chamadeo in the sense that he was the right back who had been doing the opposite for Hakimi on the other side, but leaving only 20, I think it was 20, very, very early
It was
on.
quite early on in the game. And I think that exit made it a little bit difficult for the Cameroonian side. We saw against South Africa that defensively they were quite strong, but they also capitalized on the mistakes of the South African defense. And this time around, I do think that they stood a chance, but because of the exit of Chamadeo, I think they had to find themselves tactically. I think they put in a midfielder in his place. And so I think that's where they lost it a little bit, organizing themselves and finding a way to work around the Moroccan tactics, and I just think that's where they fell short. So had they kept the same starting lineup and their original game plan, I do think that they could have made it a little bit further, perhaps even getting a goal, or made it a little bit more intense for the Moroccan side. And we saw how the Moroccans played in their advantage, and I think they're really good at doing that.
Yeah, indeed. And Chamadeo had, of course, played an important role with the last two of the goals for Cameroon. As a Stoke City supporter, I'm not too happy to have seen him leave on a stretcher tonight. Didn't look good for his leg. But just looking a little bit forward, for Morocco, they're going to be facing either Algeria, Nigeria. I mean, as I said, this is different talk. Is there more belief now in Morocco?
I think the belief will grow as matches are won, but a Nigerian attack is going to be much stronger than this Cameroon attack. Make no mistake about that. I think the two key players for Cameroon were Baleba and Boimo. Just didn't really get going. They didn't really link up. But if Nigeria get through, as I suspect they just might, that's going to offer a much tougher task to that back four, because Nigeria, I think, have got the best attack here so far. So that's going to be a very different challenge for them, I think. And again, I think they might need to change the game plan just a little bit and be a bit less defensive.
Yeah, it's been quite consistent, and I think if the opposition has been doing their research, they will make note of that. If they can find a way to silence El Kabi and Diaz, if they're going to be started in the next one, we never know, then I think that the Nigerian side can make it difficult for Moroccans, because if you look at the defense, Aguerd and Masiona have been starting in the past 2-3 games, and it's been the same back four since Hakimi came back. So if you see that and you know how to interpret it and work around it, if you have the likes of Ademola Lookman, Victor Osimhen, the way that they've been doing things, you might not be able to silence them like they did with Brahim tonight. So I do think that something has to be done to kind of counter their opposition. I think Morocco has been working really well by keeping their own tactics and their own style of play. But further on into the competition, when you face an opposition like Nigeria that's coming with something a little bit less conventional than what we've seen in the tournament, you're going to have to switch things up a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, and I hope it can be Nigeria and Morocco in that one.
No, definitely good to see. There's been some comparisons here in France about Morocco playing a bit like France in 1998. There's a bit of a talk from the latest time, in the sense coming into here, and I guess an idea of the host nation not necessarily having to perform in the most incredible way to be able to get through. And that's Andreas, is something that you do see in tournaments, especially, I mean, of course, if we think of Ivory Coast last time, we were performing pretty disastrously at this point, getting through bit by bit. Morocco are building, but being a like the home nation, there's an advantage, but I mean, there's so much pressure, of course, that counts, and that surely comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember that 1998 tournament which I covered, and the French team were under huge pressure, and they were expected to win every game. I think Moroccan fans can be some of the best and worst in the world. I mean, you saw today, wonderful fans, but they just expect their team to win easily every match. It's just not realistic. I mean, are they here to win a tournament, or are they here? This isn't a circus, they're here to win. And it was similar with France. To me, it's not a good comparison. Football is completely different from '98. France didn't set up in that way. They played more of a 4-3-1-2. They had Zidane, after all. That changed everything. So I think the only comparison is the fact that they're both playing at home. There's a strong French link with this Morocco side. A lot of the players come through the French youth system, and they're coached it as well. But I think the game really has developed, and the connection really is just that they're playing at home, and they're not the most expansive teams. France weren't in '98. They went on to win it.
And of course, it can work in tournaments, but of course, in the African Cup of Nations, being on the home side is not always an advantage in that way. At least that's what history shows. Of course, there was another game also taking place earlier tonight. That was Senegal, who go through after beating Mali 1-0. Iliman Ndiaye scored in the 27th minute after Mali's goalkeeper, Djigui Diarra, mishandled the ball. That was the only goal for them. The real disaster, though, for Mali struck just before half-time. That was their captain and Tottenham Hotspur midfielder, Yves Bissouma. He was sent off after picking up a second yellow card for a late tackle on Idrissa Gueye. Mali are out, but it wasn't the beating that they could have ended with, of course. Senegal did fail to find the net in the second half. They had 45 minutes to do it. They couldn't put the game to bed, though. That was impossible for Senegal, and it seems quite unbelievable, actually, to see that, Tando.
Yeah, true. I think it's unbelievable for Senegal, but it's also a moment to give kudos to Djigui Diarra in that game. He made a couple of incredible stops. Yes,
absolutely,
exactly.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, he rose to the occasion. I think we saw Edouard Mendy like 2, 3, 4 times in the game, and the rest it was just Djigui Diarra like being the shot stopper for the game.
And you make one mistake,
exactly,
it costs.
And that's the thing about knockout football. One mistake and you're out, and you can't even make amends for it. So that's what makes the game so exciting. But I don't think that Senegal is without chances or anything like that. But it is just a question. It's not even a question of finishing, because everything was on target. I think in the 65th minute, Sadio Mane also rose to the occasion. For the most part, he's been being the provider. I mean, he has 3 assists and he's got 9 overall, the most that we've seen in the tournament. So it does mean that he's shifted a little bit from being the provider to being actually somebody who's now putting his head in the game and being an outright attacker and taking the shots. It was on target, it was fire, it was incredible, but it was also an incredible stop from Djigui Diarra. So I do think that hats off to him. He's definitely a goalkeeper.
He's going to be remembered in the tournament because,
exactly.
Of course, there was a penalty shootout before that against Tunisia, in which he was incredible as well. Yeah,
and I think all eyes have been on Edouard Mendy. He's been incredible. He's the clean sheet guy. Mm-hmm. But I think in this particular game, it has to go to Djigui Diarra.
Words on Mali, of course. They end it here. They managed to get here without actually winning a game to this point. There's another side, though, of it where they've picked up 3rd red cards, as we mentioned tonight. That's, I mean, how do you... I mean, we know, of course, they're now managed by Tom Saintfiet, who has huge experience in African football and, of course, was known for a lot of his success in that way. But is this... what would you make of it?
It was very harsh. I thought the second yellow was really harsh. And actually, the South African referee that sent off Bissouma also sent off a player from Mali in the last game. You can't really go through these tournaments playing with 10 men. I mean, that's always going to eventually pay, isn't it? Look, Mali, as you say, they've been a little bit too conservative for me. They haven't won a game. They haven't conceded too many goals. They were unlucky today. Haidara had a horrible red card against him as well. So I have some sympathy with Mali and the refereeing decisions that have gone against them. Senegal, I mean, looking at their side, it's almost like they're able to rotate. Like Nicholas Jackson, who probably many people think is their best centre forward. He was maybe rested today. He didn't start today. He started the last game. It's a very nice position to be in. And Ndiaye, I think, is a fantastic player. And it was quite an easy goal for him today, but he's a real star for me, and he's the sort of player that can get them to that level and maybe trouble Morocco further down the line. So, it wasn't a spectacular game for Senegal, but if they go on to win this tournament, as I think they will, it will be just one little important game on the way to an Afcon for them. I think this fourth semi-final in 5 tournaments for them, so they're consistently at the top level.
Absolutely. Huge team over at the Africa Cup of Nations. Let's take a look at what's coming up then. More games to come tomorrow. Let's try and get an idea of who might be going head-to-head with today's winners. First up, it'll be Algeria taking on, as we mentioned there, Nigeria, the winner of which will be taking on Morocco. After that, 7-time champions Egypt will be facing the defending champions Ivory Coast, with Senegal awaiting the winner in the other semi-final. There is the route to the final that they'll have to follow to try and make it there to lift the cup. Let's start with a word on Algeria and Nigeria, the only two sides to have won all of their games in the group stage. Safe to say we can expect a up-tempo match to come tomorrow.
I think so. I think it's going to be nice. Question is Bulbina going to be in the starting lineup this time around after the goal in the 113th minute against DRC? Or is it just a thing that coach recognizes that he had a lucky streak and then he stays on the bench and maybe when needed, then he'll come on into the field of play? I am excited for this encounter, really. I think now seeing that also with all the riff-raff and the noise that's been happening around the Nigerian Football Federation. Exactly. It's nice to see that things have calmed down. I think also it rebuilds the camaraderie because last time around, we were asking ourselves if everything is okay in the locker room with the whole thing between Victor Osimhen and Lookman. And then now they come together, uniting as a team, even hearing something to the tune of Ndidi, the captain, even putting himself up to give the bonuses and pay them himself out of his pocket. And then eventually hearing that the bank and everybody involved came to an agreement and that they're going to receive their bonuses. So things then can come together. So I do think that maybe we can expect a more synergized Nigerian,
team.
Exactly, Nigerian side. And I do think they're going to make it difficult. But now I want to see how Zidane is going to do in this one.
Let's talk about that just now. Let's just take a listen first to, on the Algeria side, to Riyad Mahrez, what his feeling is coming up before this game tomorrow. And we'll just talk about Lucas Zidane in just a minute. Here's Riyad Mahrez.
Algeria always been very good team. Through the history, they always had top players. And that's how he is now as well. Now, like I said, it will be a very good game to play, and I think as good as well to watch. So we are ready. We're gonna give everything for our country.
Riyad Mahrez there talking about, of course, the front line in Nigeria, which is very, very strong. One that's Lucas Zidane then, Zinedine Zidane's son, is going to be having to face as he's between the sticks tomorrow. He's got a perfect track record so far, hasn't let in a goal. There was one goal let in by Algeria, but he wasn't in goal at that moment. But tomorrow he's going to be tested in a way that he hasn't been tested ever in his career before.
Probably, yeah. He's come into this side quite late. I think he's 27 years old. I saw his debut, must have been, 6 months ago. They played him in a relatively easy home game. I think his father, the great Zinedine Zidane, will be there. I think Mahrez is right. It's going to be tough against Nigeria. A key player for me, I think, is Benasser in the middle of the Algerian midfield. He's 50-50 apparently. I was looking at some Algerian newspapers today. I think if he makes it, Algeria have a chance. If he doesn't, I think they might be a little bit lacking in midfield. But as we've all said, it's about that Nigeria front three, and especially if Lookman and Osimhen can get going, I think it's going to be really tough for not exactly an ageing Algeria side, but perhaps not the quickest back four.
Just to mention on Algeria, because on Nigeria rather. Algeria. It's a bit of a...
Even the colours look alike. It's the green and white, yeah.
True, very, very true.
Yeah.
Calvin Bassey, he's on yellow. He got that pointless foul in the last game against Mozambique in the 94th minute. They've got other issues in the squads in terms of just... is this... picking up a yellow at that point for because the second yellow card would mean that he would miss the game after that. Is that an issue that... Because you talk about Osimhen, that within the squads, a bit of discipline, a bit of keeping together is what we've seen the Nigerian side kind of lacks so far in this tournament, and that could be potentially dangerous. I
think him getting a yellow card, I wouldn't necessarily say it would be a question of discipline. He's doing his job. Mm-hmm. He's a defender. He needs to do what has to be done.
But when they were 4-0 up at that point, is that...
True. I guess when you know how to play the game, I think if the Algerians can see that side or that style of play, they can use it to their advantage. When it comes to knockout football, you need to know the rules of the game really well so you can see how to finesse the system. We've seen it in rugby. Coach Rassi Erasmus won the Rugby World Cup here in France by doing that. He knew the game so well, he knew how to play by bending the rules a little bit. So if you have a smart tactician in the Algerian coach, or even just anyone who can read the game that well and see how they can use it to their advantage, maybe a couple of tackles here. But also we don't want to play filthy football. But I do think that that's something that they are aware of. And so Calvin Bassey has to be on his best behavior tomorrow. But I don't necessarily think it's a major concern. But considering that he's one of the more experienced in the Nigerian defensive side and the style of football that he plays, him being more end-to-end, it makes it even more risky for him to catch another yellow card. It can be behind as a defender, it can even come from the midfield, or even him coming up front to attack. In the last edition of the African Cup of Nations, we did see him making a couple of runs up. But I think in this edition, we're seeing a lot less of that. So if you can stay in the defensive side, maybe that is where the challenge comes. It's perhaps like a little bit claustrophobic for him. But we'll definitely see that tomorrow. And I think it is definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, all right, we'll be looking forward to watching all of that. So we'll just have a word on the game from coming up after that. There'll be, of course, Egypt. It's a team that's played through extra time in the last round, a win that cost them quite a lot for Egypt. They've got Trezeguet is still in doubt. Defender Mohamed Hamdi also out. How are they going to come into this game coming?
Well, I think the play you mentioned, Hamdi's really important. He's got an ACL. He's out for quite a while. He's on the left side. They're very wedded to three at the back, and Hamdi's a sort of wing back on the left. He's got a very important role, and it's a real clash of styles with that back three. All of them are 31, 32. Up against this Côte d'Ivoire side we've talked about. They're a young, aggressive, fast side. It's going to be a really good clash of cultures and styles. And I think Egypt's back three is really going to be tested tomorrow. That's what's going to be interesting. You know, no prizes for guessing. They've got to get Salah in the game and test the West Africans at the other end of the pitch. But I think this is the one I'm really looking forward to, actually, of all
Huge
the quarterfinals,
tomorrow,
because it's such a contrast in styles.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say that Ivory Coast haven't really been tested enough? I mean, of course, they did play Cameroon in the group stage, but I mean, they might be in for a bit of shock tomorrow. I mean, they haven't had the biggest, let's say, with all respect to all teams, but any of the bigger opponents that are left still now. I mean, that might be a bit. Maybe we haven't seen everything that Ivory Coast can give in that situation, but also maybe they can suffer. Who knows?
I think you do mention a good point about the shock that you can experience, because so far we've been speaking about teams rising up to the occasion with the opponents getting a little bit more intense or even just a little bit more synergy. But I do think that sides that have gotten a little bit comfortable with their style of play might get a slight shock. And that could possibly happen, especially when you're playing against the Pharaohs, who seem to be coming together a lot better, finding their style of play in this Afcon. So I definitely think it's something to look out for, but I don't think it's quite a big concern. I think they're capable, and they've maintained composure. They kept a clean sheet in the last game. So I don't necessarily think there's something huge to worry about, especially them facing Egypt tomorrow.
How have they kept so much composure as defending champions?
They've got options.
They've got
plenty of options. They have Touré that we saw in the last game. Last time we even spoken about the youngsters that are in the squad that are performing so well. But you also have a nice balance of experience and the newcomers. So you have the fresh legs with a fresh mind and a fresh understanding of the game. And then you have the experience that keeps that big match temperament and stays in the game. And so you'll have the Kessie, the Sangares, and then you also have then the new guys. And so I do think that it's going to be okay for Ivory Coast. It might be a little bit more of a challenge for the Egyptian side, who I think have been scraping it through in this tournament.
Now, would you say MS5 definitely building something? I mean, came in urgency last time round, but reaching this side with the Ivory Coast, with, of course, changes you mentioned in the squads. I mean, he's there to stay as things seem right now.
Clearly, well, he's unbeaten. He took over halfway through that last tournament, went on to win it. This is a very different kind of situation because we talked about pressure. It's huge pressure in Ivory Coast. A little bit less this time. It's a younger team with a few new faces. So I won't say the pressure's off. There's still a lot of pressure. It's a football-mad country. Obviously, Côte d'Ivoire, they follow every kick of their team. But if anything, I think there's a little bit more pressure on Egypt. And these are two teams going to the World Cup, remember. And that's going to focus the mind as well and give us a good look about what we're going to see next summer. So I'm really looking forward to that quarterfinal.
Yeah, hoping for some big clashes to come tomorrow. All right, well, Tando, I'll see you again tomorrow. Andreas, you'll be back in a couple of days' time. We'll have Karim back with us. He'll be over in Morocco. We'll be speaking from him from a distance. But in the meantime, have a good night to both of you. We'll be back, as mentioned, same time tomorrow night to cover everything in the tournament. See you then. Have a good night.